Representing a taxpayer before appeals process. Okay, sometimes a taxpayer can, basically may not be happy with the determination of the IRS or my during an audit. Okay, so taxpayers can request or can get through an appeals process if we protest the decision of the IRS. Okay, so IRS has an appeals process, okay, wherein taxpayers disagree on a tax related issues. It usually arises by means of an audit. Okay, a taxpayer was audited either during an office audit or a field audit, and IRS has assessed further taxes and penalties. Okay, and the taxpayer is not really happy with it. Okay, that's when the taxpayer gets into an appeals process. So usually, since this is a procedure, okay, that takes a lot of efforts from the taxpayer. Taxpayer prefers to have somebody to represent him, such as an EA or CPA or an attorney, okay, who are not, who are in good standing with the IRS, right? That's where an EA comes into picture with regards to taxpayers' appeals process, okay? So now oftentimes, as I said, the taxpayers disagree with, you know uh, the uh, the audit assessments that the IRS employees has done. So typically a taxpayer can request, okay, each audit, at the end of each audit, okay, IRS officers or IRS employees might give him a letter of determination. Okay, that's called a letter of determination. Okay, and the IRS employee would ask him to basically sign Form 870. Okay, wherein if you're signing the Form 870, the taxpayer is typically accepting the provisions of letter of determination and agreeing to pay. Okay, if the taxpayer doesn't get into any litigations, headaches, he could sign 870 and pay up what they have told you. Okay, if you want to protest, that's when you will not sign this, because once you're signing Form 870, you're actually waiving off any of your rights to go to the courts, right? So if you do not sign this, you want to protest, okay? You could do that through an EA or a CPA or an attorney, all right, via an appeals process. So you could meet up with your, superior of the audit, employee. Okay, you could meet up and discuss the case. Okay, that's the first instance. If it doesn't work out, then you can go to the IRS's appeals process. Okay, there's an appeals office at the IRS. You could request your case to be seen. Okay, if there is no uh, favorable situation in that, that's when you get 30 days letter or a 90 days letter and things like that. Let's go on that. Okay. Oftentimes, a taxpayer can request to the case be transferred as a, or considered as a small tax case. Okay. So usually, um, you could request this when your tax liabilities are less than not 25, less than 50,000. Okay. So basically, if you take this small tax case request, this is a very informal way of you're looking at the appeals. Okay, therefore taxpayers would be more comfortable. Okay, and that's the reason you could actually request the IRS to be transferred to a small tax case request. Okay, very informal, very the procedures are very easy in case of a small tax case. Okay, now if the taxpayer wants to protest against the decision, okay, an EA could basically help him to draft the formal protest. Okay, and it should include the taxpayer's name, address, telephone numbers, uh, a statement that mentioning that the taxpayer wants to appeals the IRS findings. Okay, a letter showing that why does the taxpayer doesn't agree with the decision of the IRS employee. Okay, and of course you have to mention the tax periods and years involved, um, and any supporting positions that a taxpayer has in his favor. Okay, it could be probably a previous tax court decision or something like that. Okay, previous tax court decision. Okay, that could be a supporting for the taxpayer's position. Okay, and if you have, like, substantial authority, he has to mention that why does he do that. And of course it doesn't mean that IRS could always be right. So of course you could request for reconsideration. Okay, it must be a written protest. Okay, and also the taxpayer must sign the written protest, um, and he has to state that this is true under under his best belief. Okay, and also the EA preparing it has to include a statement saying that, as of my best knowledge and belief, they are true, correct, and complete. Okay, and of course the EA has to, or a CPA or an attorney has to sign it. Okay, on behalf, uh, okay, of the client. Okay, and send it to the IRS. Okay, so now, uh, all of this starts when the IRS comes for an audit. Okay, and they basically examines your tax records via their systems. It could be random, it could be document matching systems. Okay, your W2 revenues are not matching with W2 that you have filed. So IRS has a direct W2 from the employer, and you would report this income on your 1040. Okay, so if the revenues or incomes are not matching as per W2 that the IRS has, which is sent by the employers, and what you have reported on your 1040, of course, this is called document matching, right? It doesn't match up, then uh, probably your records might come in for an examination from the IRS. Okay, and if they see any discrepancy, uh, they would ask you to sign 870. Okay, form 870, and pay up the balance. Okay, pay up the balance. This could be, okay, an additional tax that they have assessed. Okay, if you want to protest, you don't sign this, what then? They send you a preliminary 30-day letter. Okay, so you have time to go to an appeals process within after 30 days. Okay, if doesn't happen, then they send you a notice of deficiency. Okay, which is called a 90 days letter. Okay, if you're outside, it's called a 150 days letter if outside US due to some reasons, military service or something like that. You have 150 days from the date of notice of deficiency to go to the tax courts. So this notice of deficiency is your entry ticket. Okay, entry ticket for the IRS, for the tax codes. Okay, for the tax codes. So unless you get this, you can't really, uh, contest in the tax. So you get a 90-day letter. Okay, and that's when you begin the litigation with the IRS. Unless you get a notice of deficiency, you can't really begin the tax litigation. Okay, let's see that. So this could be an office audit or a field audit, isn't it? It could be an office audit or a field audit. Now, office audit could be via email or telephone. Okay, or telephone. because oftentimes field audits are really costly. It takes a lot of resources from the IRS. So therefore, they might prefer an email, or a telephonic, examination. They might send you an email saying that we need supporting for these stuff. Okay, and the taxpayer basically would have to respond to that. If they find any discrepancy, okay, they might ask you to sign a form 870 and pay. Okay, if you do not want any headache, what you can do is that sign this and pay the bill. Okay, matter is resolved. Okay, by signing this, you're actually waiving any of your rights to get into the tax courts and tax petitions. Okay, so if you do not want, if you want peace of mind, sign it and pay up. Okay, if you want to fight, then they will send you something called a preliminary notice of 30 days later. Okay, that's when you can get into the IRS approvals, appeals process. Or if you don't do that, okay, you did not request an appeal, neither did you pay, then they'll send you something called a notice of deficiency, which is called 90 days later. Okay, and um, that's when you can get into litigation. So you have ideally three courts that you can go, litigations. Okay, you can start with tax courts. Sorry, tax courts. Okay, they only hear tax cases. Okay, or you can go to district courts. Okay, they hear all kinds of cases. Or you could go for um, you know courts of federal claims. Okay, they also hear, uh, now predominantly they hear most of the money damages against US. Okay, that's what courts of federal claims do that, right? In certain cases, if you want to go to a tax court, you might have to pay, you may not have to pay, you can protest without paying. Okay, if you are not happy with this, you could go for an appeals, even an appeals court. So the appeals court is geographical courts of appeals for tax courts and district courts. Okay, and the appeals court for federal claims is the appeals court for federal claims, right? If you're not even happy with the appeals courts, then you can go basically to the Supreme Court, which is very rare, okay, because they don't hear much of the tax cases. Okay, folks, this is about representing a taxpayer before appeals.